Okay, we're on Zion Amud Beis. And yesterday the Gemara spoke about the shittas that hold that there's a certain amount of kvius that's necessary. And the last thing the Gemara mentioned was that Acherim say that around Sukkah is supposed to puzzle. Acherim Omrim, Sukkah Sui Kashobach, Pasula, but Lafisha and Lozovio. So we don't pass like that. We pass that around Sukkah is kosher. And that's going to be today's sugya about around Sukkah. That's the whole sugya subject today. And the sugya is going to be how big it has to be. How big it has to be in order to get the right dimension inside. So it's partial to the Gemara that you have to be able to get the shape of the sukkah. We hold 7 by 7 tefachim. It's possible that the bottle is just it's also not. So it's in the middle, just in the middle. That can. Thank you. Okay. Also not okay. Just okay. So oh, that's bottom over there also. Okay. It has a cover. I'm sorry. Okay. I might get everybody can see. Is this good for everybody? Okay. So it's partial to the Gemara, you have to have the shape. We're going to pass 7 by 7 tefachim, as we know. So you have to have the circle so big they should be able to fit in the shape of 7 by 7. It's not enough to have the area of 7 by 7 and make it shape it according to what you want. You have to have the area, the shape of a 7 by 7 square should be able to fit into the circle. We'll see a little bit more as we go on.
Can the round sukkah have any openings also? I mean, like, does that have to be closed?
No. The same way you like it. It's Omid Rubal approach for sure is going to be good, right? You have to have, yeah, and even that we had, you could have sometimes coolers. You're not going to have the cooler over here about 2 and a tefach because you don't have any. But if you have Omid Rubal approach, the whole thing should be more closed than open, then surely it's good. Okay, that's also going to start now. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, that's what the Gemara starts now. Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Stuka Sukkah Kikivshan. So for some reason the Gemara before said about Shovach, which meant around Sukkah. Here it says a Kivshan, which also means round. So I don't know why the Gemara changed it. Rabbi Yochanan is talking before Acherim was talking, but the point is around Sukkah. So how big does it have to be? If it's big enough that you could fit in its circumference 24 people, it's kosher. No. So Gemara says right away. We're talking about the Kaman Rebbe. He was going like Rebbe. So it comes out that the Yochanan happens to like Rebbe. We don't pass him like that. We could apply his formula to us also. But he's talking about Rebbe's opinion that holds you have to have a sukkah 4 by 4 amas, and he's going to say how big the sukkah has to be. The sukkah has to be so big that you should be able to have a circumference of 24 people around, which the Gemara is going to say Lachor means 24 amas. And the Gemara is going to do all the math to figure out what he meant to say. The Gemara takes us step by step, and even though some things are simple that it's wrong, but the Gemara is working out the math with us, so don't be surprised that some things are going to be simple that it's not the right calculation, but the Gemara takes it step by step. So why did they make a sukkah so big? It has to be 24 amas circumference. Mechdi, Gavra, V'amsa, Yosef. Each person takes up an amma. A man sits in an amma. That means that the person's place when he's sitting is an amma. That's the Gemara's assumption. How big is a person? You can say an amma by an amma, from shoulder to shoulder. Also, if he's sitting, so from his thigh, the thigh is also an amma, very same as his arm. So a person is an amma wide.
A little smaller than 7 by 7.
Nothing to do with not in the 6. You're right, but nothing. You're right as far as the side point.
Yeah.
But here we're talking about Dalar Amas. We're going to the sheet also. Sukkah has to be Dalar Amas, and he said you have 24 people sitting in a circle. That would mean that you have a circumference of 24 amas. And the Gemara wants to know how do you have to have so big? The ratio between the circumference and the diameter, the circumference, the measurement of the circle, and the diameter means the rochav is the diameter, so it says it's 1 to 3. We know that it's 3.14, that's pi. We had that amazing drash that we learned at Remez, that in the pasuk where it talks about that kav shloshim amo yisovoso, and it says that you had a diameter of 10, and the pasuk says that the circumference was 30. There's an amazing thing over there with the Korean Ksiv. We could do it again one day, that there was a hay, which is a Korean Ksiv, and we said over there that it says not only 3.14, it says 3.1495, like it goes, Imam fits it to the exact. It's fascinating remez that the Gemara knew well, good and well, that it's exact. But the Gemara, for our purposes, the Gemara doesn't make you have to calculate it so exact. You can go 1 to 3. For every diameter of 1, the circumference is 3. So the Gemara is asking, if you want Dalet Amos, what does Rebbe say? You have to have Dalet Amos. So okay, so the circumference is going to be times 3. Of course, that's not true because because you have to have the whole area, the whole it needs the area, and we're going to say you have to have even the shape of 4x4. That's not enough yet, but we're taking one step at a time. So if the diameter is 4, like Rebbe said, the diameter has to be 4. So then the circle should be times 3, 12. Now, of course, it's not true. The Gemara is going to say it's not. That's only if it will be a circle, but you have to have a square of 4x4, which is much more. That's what the Gemara first started. That whatever has a circumference of 3 has a diameter of 1. So the kasha is the sagi. How come you're making 24? It should be enough to have a circumference of 12. Just have to stop a second to. I'm sorry. Okay, back on.
I'm sorry, how do we get to 12?
Because the diameter is 4, so then
Okay.
the circumference is going to be
3 times 4.
times
3
3.
times 4.
Right. But the more it's not true. 1 second. We'll get there in a second. The circumference is 3 times the diameter. Really, it's 3.14. The more is happy. The more is happy with approximation of 3. But the Gemara says top line, that's only a circle. It's true that the circle is 3 times the diameter. But as a square, you have to have a square of 4x4, not a circle of a diameter of 4, and you have to have more. But the Gemara says how much more? So still b'shitz sagi. How much more? Here's the picture over here. How much more is a square more than a circle? If you have a diameter of 4, so the circle is going to be 12. How much would the perimeter be of the square? 16. 4, 8, 12, 16. So that's a quarter more. So still, you shouldn't have to have more than 16. So the more thinks even if you take the square and you make it into a circle, means these 16 people, if they're sitting in a circle, they also will be the same thing. But the Gemara says, no, it's not true. They should have to be able to have a square, next picture over here, you have to have that a square of Dalet al Dalet should be able to fit into the circle. So how much bigger is the circle going to be? The perimeter of the square is 16, 4, 8, 12, 16. How much does the circumference of the circle have to be around that? That's the Gemara's question now. The Gemara says, first of all, it says 16 is enough. The Gemara says, no, you have to have a circle around it. Immediately be equal enough to be garibua. A circle inside the square, so you're right that it's a quarter more and you get 16. But here you have to have a circle around that. A square inside the circle is more than the 16. So how much is that? We should more than the karnasa. That means that the protrusion, that the corners of the square are pushing out the circle, so you have to have more. Something's getting pushed out over here. All of the addition of the circle around the square is more. So the one thinks at this point maybe it's going to be 24. If the square is 4x4, so maybe the circumference would have to be 24. But the Gemara says not true. Mechti. What's the Gemara's formula going to be? It's going to say, let's figure out the diagonal of the square. If we know the diagonal of the square, we'll be able to know times 3 is going to be the circumference of the circle. How much is the diagonal of the square if it's 4x4? So then has a formula that every 1x1 is 1 2/5. You add on 2/5 per 1. It's also not exact. Places also points out it's not exact. Nowadays they would do it a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It gets more accurate, but approximately it's going to be 1 2/5 per every 1. Every square amma would be 1 2/5 for the diagonal. If this would be 1x1, so the diagonal will be 1 2/5. Now that it's 4x4, so you're going to add on 4 times the 2/5. So you get 8/5. So that's going to be 5 3/5. If it's going to be 4x4, so the diagonal is going to be 5 3/5. I think on the calculator it comes out to 5.65, something like that. It's approximately, so the diagonal is 5 3/5. So if we know that the diagonal is 5 3/5, how much is this to come down? That it's going to be times 3. The more goes with the formula times 3. That comes out to 16 4/5. So still, Rabbi Yochanan, why get 24? It's only 16 4/5. Every square amma is an amma and 2/5 on the diagonal. So b'shiv sanaki chum shasagya 17 minus a fifth, which is 16 4/5. The word naki means subtract. 17 minus a fifth should be good enough. How come you said 24? Big kasha. Even according to Rebbe, the biggest shita that says that you have to have a circle 4x4 ammas, the biggest you should have to have the circle should have to be 16 4/5. So the one says low duck. Round it off. So that's the obvious question. You rounded off from 16 plus 24. I couldn't say the kasha better than Moshe says. Rounded it off. So the Abraham Mir Lo Dak Laporta, a little bit, you could say round it off. But Tuva Mir Lo Dak, you can round it off from 16 and 4 fifths to 24. So the Gemara tries a whole new avenue to try to get out of this. Oh, then Mark Shisha, Fist of Rabashi, me, Savas, Gava, Bamsa, Yasif. We took the premise that each person takes up an amma. But that's not a given. Maybe not. Maybe a person's a bit smaller. Maybe a person is only two-thirds of an amma. Maybe plus a Gavri Betata Yamsa Yasli. That 3 people can get into 2 ammas, which is another way of saying each person is 2/3 of an amma. So you can get 3 people. If each person is 2/3 of an amma, you'll get 2 people into 3 people into 2 ammas. What do we gain? Rabbi Yochanan said 24 people. He didn't say 24 ammas. He said 24 people. So maybe that means a circumference of 16. So we're getting closer already. How much does it come out to be if there are 24 people in a circle and we're saying that each person is only 2/3 of a number? 16. But the cash was you need 16 and 4 fifths. You need 16 and 4 fifths. A low duck, you rounded it off. Also no good. I wasn't happy with that. You can round it off and a little bit more, but you can round it off a little bit less. Someone's going to go make a round sukkah with 16 numbers, and really you have to have 16 and 4 fifths. The you can't be rounded off leniently, and you can make a puzzle sukkah. So that's a problem. Back to the problem again, that he said 24, and it's only be 16 and 4 fifths. Either he said 24, he said 16. Either one is good. Back to what we said, each person takes up an amma. So he said 24 ammas. So you don't need so much. No, one mistake. Till now we thought that the 24 people they're sitting inside the circle. You make 24 people sit in a circle, and make the circle around them, make the wall around them. That means 24 ammas. No, the wall is within the circle of the people. Make a circle of people, 24 people sitting in a circle, and the wall of the circle should be inside them, not outside them. How much is each person? We said amma. He's amma both directions. He's amma from shoulder to shoulder. He's an amma. His thigh when he's sitting is also an amma. And therefore, till now we thought that there was if he had said a circle of 24, that would be a diameter of 8. True. If it would have been a circumference of 24, that would have meant right. So it would have meant a diameter of 8. Now we're taking away 2 ammas from both sides. We're saying that the wall is not behind their backs. The wall is by their knees. They're sitting and the wall is in front of their knees. How much do you take away from the diameter? You took away 2 ammas on either side of the circle. So now the diameter is only 6. So how much is going to be the circumference of that diameter times 3? 18. And what did he say? 16 and 4 fifths. Okay, that's good enough. That's a little bit, and it's lachumra. Everything fits. That's Mar's answer. Everyone's happy with the answer that he meant to say. Not 24 ammas, he meant to say 18 ammas. How did he express himself by saying have 24 people sit in a circle and the sukkah is going to be inside of them? That's a diameter of 6, which is a circumference of 18, and really a circumference of 16 and 4 fifths is good enough. And he said a little bit more. That's the Gemara's answer. Where is that? Each person takes up a number, not 2/3 of a number. Rabbi Yochanan was not calculating the place of the people. It means that the wall is inside of them. How much does it come out? 18. The kasha was that it would have been enough for 16 and 4 fifths. I know the low dog. So he rounded it off. That's okay. He might have been a little bit more. Not that he was machmir. Just for saying he rounded it off a little bit extra. And really, 16 and 4 fifths is good enough. So what do we get from this Gemara? The main thing we get is that you have to get the shape of the sukkah, retain the shape, and get a circle that should retain the shape inside. We didn't hold all this. We hold 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim. And if you make a round sukkah, you don't have to have 16 and 4 fifths amma. All you have to have is the circumference, which would allow you to get in a square of 7 by 7 tefachim. It's approximately 29 point something, 30 tefachim. If you have, according to the Mikdash measurement, just take a 7 by 7 tefachim and get the diagonal, then you multiply it by 3, and you'll get approximately a third. So there's no halacha that's being said. No halacha was said. We thought some big mistake, but we came out that he's not saying anything. He's saying that you have to be able to, what we do see, you have to be able to get the shape of the sukkah without changing the shape. You have to get a square. You can make a different shape, but it has to be able to contain the square of 7 by 7 tefachim. Either more talking about dollar by dollar numbers, but talking about 7 by 7 tefachim. The Gemara at the end says one more thing. It comes up about 30 tvachim. 30 tvachim. Here the Gemara is going with Amos. The Gemara comes 16 and 4/5 Amos. But that's only the math. But you have 7 by 7 tvachim, it comes out about 29 point something.
Now it's approximately 6 tvachim.
A number 6 tvachim. The Gemara says one more answer for Rabbi Yochanan. What? It's very small. It's very small. 7 tvachim is very small. Right. Shulchan is not a big table. Shulchan is going to be like a little board of a 2x4 or something like that. Yeah, kiddush cup and a piece of fish, a piece of challah, a little dukala, a piece of fish, a little salad, all these little things. You have the whole thing. You can have the whole meal over there. And dessert also with a bottle of wine. You get.
Could be each course, you bring something else.
This table is it's gonna be like a half of this table? Like from here to here, that's gonna be.
Yeah. That's the whole sukkah.
That's all.
Or a refrigerator, an oven box. You get an oven box here. You take the oven box and you open up the bottom and the top, and you put schach on top, and you have a sukkah. Take away one wall, so you should have to get in. Three good walls. Yeah, mamish is a good sukkah. Uh-huh. They're also the same size. How big are they? Russia, minimum. Huh? Very nice. Okay, that's halacha.
It's portable.
The Gemara says that the sukkah is considered an easy mitzvah. Like it says, Lashon Lavo, the Goyim are going to say we want another chance. Hashem says you don't deserve it, but I'll give you an easy mitzvah and sukkah. Why is it easy mitzvah? It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost any. People have spent a lot of money on sukkah. You don't have to. That's the person wants to be comfortable, but the mitzvah itself is very easy. Okay, the Gemara tries one more thing. Rabbanan de Kesari, V'ambila the Yana de Kesari Amri, Igula, Rabbanan of Kesari, Caesarea, Kesari, or some say the Yana de Kesari. They said that there's a formula. Igula the nothing we go Rivua River. Back to the beginning again. That we said this already before. That the square around the circle is a quarter bigger, which we said is true. That the circumference, the perimeter of the square around the circle is a quarter bigger than the circumference. But now they have a formula also for the next case. They have a formula, and they're going to say that the circle around the square is a third bigger. If there's a perimeter of 16, so the circumference is going to be 24. And then the Rechner is very good. The Rechner would make a lot of sense if that would be true. But the Gemara is going to say it's not true. He just said it's 16 and 4/5. It's Bechana 24. If that would be true, that the formula would be that the circumference is bigger than the perimeter, a whole third bigger, then the Rechner would have made sense. But the Gemara is true that it's not true. So what does the Gemara say? Rabban de Kisavi said if the square is around the circle, then it's a quarter bigger. That's true. And the next point on the next page, on the page, Rivua the enough to go Igula Palga. Palga Rashi says means that it's half of the square. If you have a circle around the circle is bigger, half of the square. If the square was a perimeter of 16, half of that is 8. So the circumference is 8 bigger. So if the that picture we had a second ago, let's look at the picture a second over there. Where do we go here? If the perimeter of the square would be 16, so the circumference of the circle is 24. But the more ends it's not true. It's not true at all. It's only 16 and 4/5. It's a drop bigger. It's not 20. It's not a third bigger. So it's not true. So if it would be true, Rabbi Yochanan would make sense. And maybe Rabbi Yochanan was going like that, but it's not true.
You can't say it's only 4/5 bigger than 16. Look how much.
It's true. It is no. You should be asking. It's a fact. It's a mathematical fact.
Wow.
Because look at it. That the perimeter is 16. The diagonal is approximately 5.65, and times 3.14. It's very close. So it's true that because it only gets pushed out a little bit. In the first case, you see how much went out of its way, so to speak. You're making a circle. How much more did you have to go out of your way? Made a big detour. He went straight and then out. So all that's going to give you a quarter more. If the circle is 12, the perimeter is going to be 16. But in this case, that the square is 16, the circle around is only going to be 4/5 more. You went and made a small detour. You went a little bit out of your way each time. You made a circle. So the Gemara seems to continue that there was such an opinion. On the Amud Beis it says Palga means what we would call a third. Palga means half of the square. So if the square was 14, so the circumference around it is another third bigger. But the Gemara says below it's not true. The Chazina and the low heavy kuli how we see it's not true. It's only 16 and 4/5. It's not 24. So that was wrong. So that's the end of the Gemara. The Gemara says there's no chiddush in Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is just doing the math for you, and he says that you have to have the math that a circle big enough you should be able to get the square inside. The biggest difficulty with this Gemara is how did Rabbanan de Kisar make such a mistake? They made a formula that doesn't make any sense. It's not true. They made a formula that the circumference is a third bigger than the perimeter. It's just like you say, that's not true. So Taisa says that this formula is true if you're talking about the area. If you're talking about the area, it would be true. The area of the circle is a third bigger than the area of the square inside of it. Not the circumference, not talking about the perimeter and the circumference. That's talking about area alone. The area of the circle around the square will be a third bigger. And that's true. What? I'm not following. The area of the square happens to be 16, 4 times 4. The perimeter happens to be also for 16, but the area is also 16. But the circle, how do we do that? The circle is going to be pi r squared. If anybody wants to do the math for us, pi r squared, if you have, we know that the radius over here is going to be half of 5 3/5, whatever, half of 5.65 times 3.14. If anybody has a, no, I'm sorry, not time, then square it. Pi r squared, 3.14 times the half of the radius over here, and then square it, and that's going to give you the area of the circle. The Gemara doesn't
3.14
times. You have to do half of the diameter, which is half of 5.65. 5.65 divided by 2,
2.82.
then times 3.14 times. Okay, we'll figure it out. But anyway, it comes out.
8.875.
What is that?
That's 8.875, and then you square that.
Yes.
8.87. Oh,
Pi r, again, r squared, pi times r squared. Pi r squared. The radius squared.
I thought you said take half the radius.
The radius.
Oh, the radius is half the diameter. Yeah, I see.
Right. Anybody? Okay, we'll do it later then. But Taisa said, I think it's true. I mean, it fits that, again, it will be approximated, but it means that the area of the circle is bigger than the square. So that was true. But how did they make a mistake? So Taisa goes that they just heard the Masorah of this formula. They made a mistake. They thought it was talking about the circumference, really it's talking about the area, which is a pretty bad mistake also. So there are other pshatim also to explain that the Yochanan himself also was talking about the area. And if anybody wants to hear another pshat, we could hear it one day. But the way the Gemara comes out, just as far as the halacha goes, there's no chiddush over here. And the only question was how to explain what they meant. Where was the mistake? But so far, the Gemara comes there, says that you have to have the shape of the whatever size you need should be able to fit into the circle that you're making. You can have a different shape, but it has to be able to fit the shape of, if you hold dollar by dollar amis or you hold 7 by 7 tvachim, that shape has to fit in. Just to point out, we said it a couple of days ago, but let's repeat it because this is the Gemara. They talk about when you say that a room has to be dollar by dollar amis, what if you have the area, but it's a different shape? They talk about the Hilchas Mezuzah. A sukkah mezuzah is only a room's only chayv in mezuzah if it's dollar by dollar. And they talk about what if it has the area of dollar by dollar, but it doesn't have the shape of dollar by dollar.
oh, good.
So it means not chayv in the
2 times
mezuzah.
8 instead of 4 times 4.
Right. So is it chayiv by mezuzah? So in the Shulchan, some say that the Rambam said that it's chayiv, but it's a fair Gemara. But it says not that. Gemara says fair. Gemara says even by sukkah you have to have the shape of 4 by 4. It's not enough to have the area. You have to have the shape of 4 by 4. So the truth is the Rambam. Yes, please.
There's also a major discussion with the Mogen of Raman in the poskim about if you'd have a sukkah that's either round or with a very narrow corner. There are some people, but we don't hold by it, that would say don't sit in that part of it, but we don't in the end hold by it.
Okay, but just the point that I was saying is that even though the Rambam is understood by some that if you have the shape of the area, if you have the area of 4 by 4, you're chayiv in mezuzah, but this Gemara says it's not like that, and it comes out the Rambam himself never said that, and it was just a misunderstanding in the Rambam. He said it was certain words kedei l'rabeya, which was misunderstood that it might have meant the area, but it doesn't mean that. He means the shape also. And the Rambam in Rav Kapach's translation, he says the Rambam in Arabic said that he means that it has to be the shape of 4x4, and there's no machlokes. And if you have any room which is not the shape of 4x4 amos, it's not chayv in a mezuzah, even if it has a big area. If it's narrow and long, you don't need a mezuzah. Any shape. If you have long, if you don't have a round room, it can be chayv. Because if it has the shape of 4x4 could fit into it, like Agamor. But if it doesn't have the shape of 4x4 amos, I'm not explaining myself. If you can't fit into this room a square of 4x4, it's not chayv in mezuzah. Even if it's long and narrow, it's not chayv in mezuzah. Only if you can get the square of 4x4 into the room. Once I got that, then it's chayv in mezuzah, no matter what shape it is. But if it doesn't have the shape, you can't. If you can't fit into it, if you can't fit into it, the shape of 4x4, then it's not a square. Then it's not chayv in mezuzah, even if it has the area of that. That's not halachas already. Maybe it's less than 4 amos. Less than 4 amos also maybe. Okay, but that's not. But when you have a room which is 4 amos, only if it's you could fit into it the shape of 4x4. So then it wouldn't be chayv in mezuzah. Okay, that's ended that sugya.
In terms of the pi r squared, I came up with around 77. Does that make sense?
No, can't make sense, right? Wouldn't make sense. No.
When you say pi r squared, you mean pi times r and then square the whole thing, or you mean r squared and plus pi, or times
I don't remember the formula. Does anybody remember the formula?
Okay.
How to get the area of a circle?
It's r squared times pi.
R squared, I see. So that would be 5.6 squared.
You don't square the pi. You don't square the radius.
Yeah.
Pi.
Times r squared.
Yeah.
Times the radius, which is
106.5. Does that make me seem better?
Square the radius and all that times 3.14.
106.6.
pi r squared.
Still 106.6.
That should be right, because the kav kave is 106 to 111. You divide.
Oh, no. 24. I'm sorry, 24. We're talking about the radius. 24 and a half.
Very nice. That's what I was looking for.
Finally, okay, it's 2.8 squared. Yeah, times 3.14.
Beautiful. So that's what we said, that if the area of the square is 16, the area of the circle around it is 24.
That's the chatchila.
What's the chatchila mean?
That was the beginning. We said 24.
Right. So if you say Rabbi Yochanan meant the area, so if Rabbi Yochanan himself meant that, then also would be beautiful. The Gemara doesn't think so. The Gemara thinks Rabbi Yochanan meant the circumference. But if Rabbi Yochanan meant the area, then everything's beautiful, and that would have been a nice shot. And some talk about that maybe that's what Rabbi Yochanan really meant. The Gemara just didn't see that in the words, because the word says Rabbi Yochanan says Yesh Hoshiv. The Gemara to back kefo, so the more thought it means on the circumference. But if you say it means in the hekefo, in the hekef, inside the circumference, in the area, then everything's beautiful. That it's the area. You have to have an area of 24 in order to be able to fit in the square, which would be area of 16. Okay, it's a nice shot to answer Rabbi Yochanan. So we continue. Next Gemara, new sugya. I'm Rabbi Levi. Yisham Rabbi Meir. Pi times radius squared. Radius squared times pi. Okay, new Gemara. I'm Rabbi Levi. Yisham Rabbi Meir. Shtei sukkah shel yotzrim. Suluf nemizu. A yotzer was a potter. And not dafka, but it means that they had some kind of a store, and they used to make shack. And he made one inside the other, an inner room and an outer room. And the inner room was his living quarters, and also Rashi says storage and things like that. And the outer room was his store. And you have such kind of businesses like that. The back room is their living quarters, and the front room is their store. So and here they're made out of their shack-like kind of structures, and they have kosher schach. They made it out of straw, whatever it is. So he wants to know if he can use it as a sukkah. It's kosher sukkah. It means it's not the material. It's made out of kosher schach material. So he wants to know if he can use it for a sukkah. So it says, "Hapnim in the sukkah, v'chayevas b'mezuzah, v'chitzon l'sukkah, p'tur manu mezuzah." The inner one is a living quarters, so it's not a kosher sukkah. It means a new problem. Even though everything's kosher about it, it has good walls, it has the right height, it has the right material, but it's not kosher because it's his house the whole year round. It's his year-round house, and the sukkah. It has to be that he does something on sukkahs that's different than the whole year. If he continues living in the same house, if someone happens to have a sukkah that he lives there, a kosher sukkah that he lives there the whole year, it's not good for sukkahs anymore, because There's no difference between his house and his sukkah. It has to be that it's going out of his house. So again, if he renews it, if he picks it up, puts it down, fine, he made a new sukkah out of that. But if he just leave it the way it is, it's not kosher. Later on, tomorrow's coming up a sukkah. If you have to have a sukkah l'shma, the same sukkah, we possibly don't have to, as long as it's made for shade. And this thing was made for shade. The fact that he's there the whole year round, that's the new psul.
You have to do it for what? To come hakshir for place. Not for sukkah. It could be somewhere to start.
So you're advanced. And the Gemara is going to say, the Gemara says that it's kosher. The Yerushalmi says you have to have the same sukkah, but it still says you don't have to pass like Beistillah. It says over there, the Yerushalmi says Yechadish B'Dova, you should do something. But that's advanced. That's the Yerushalmi, and that's the Chatchila. But here it says that it's kosher. It's going to be kosher if not for this new problem that it's his year-round house. So it would have been kosher. But here it says, Apnim is saying the sukkah, the inner one is not a sukkah because it's his year-round house. And even everything's kosher, the fact that he lives there the whole year-round makes that it shouldn't be a kosher sukkah. Because it's his living quarters. But the chitzon, the outer room, sukkah, it is a kosher sukkah because he's moving into a store. It's not a way that he usually lives. He just usually does business over there. Now he's going to live there for 7 days. That's a good sukkah. But because a store is part of a mezuzah. A store is part of a mezuzah. Only a store, a chanut. A store is part of a mezuzah. It's not called living. It's not called living. That's what it says here, and Shulchan Aruch says so. And maybe we'll look into it a little bit more to find more contemporary poskim. But the Shulchan Aruch says a store is part of a mezuzah. And the poskim say because he doesn't live there at night, even though he's there the whole day, he's not there at night. And that's what it says in Al Gemara, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Right. They probably don't say a bracha, do they?
Let's say a kitchen is a kitchen type. You don't sleep there. You sleep there. Sometimes they cook or eat.
I guess the inside of the house.
Or so on. But it's not made for sleeping. Sometimes they don't even eat there. If it's a kitchen you eat also, I could hear it. But it's just a place where women cook.
Eat enough and drink enough.
There's
Fall
some
asleep on the
people sleep
table.
in the
What's the
kitchen
question?
also.
They have a few glasses of wine in the other. Flat on the
Okay.
table.
I don't know.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, I didn't understand when you said that. I thought you said the Yotzerim are potterers. I thought that meant
Potters.
someone who makes pottery. So what does it mean he's inside of something else?
No. Sukkah shel Yotzrim. They made shacks. They lived in shacks. These potters, they had a shack for their business, and the inner shack, the back store, the back room, was where he lived. He lived in the back room. In the front room, he did business. He had his pots, whatever storage, and also he had a table and a bed, and that was his living quarters. In the back room. In the front room, he did business. So the back room, and even though it's a kosher sukkah, but since he lives there the whole year round, it's not kosher for sukkahs. His front room, which is also a kosher sukkah, that's why it's kosher for sukkahs, because if he's going to move into a store to live there, that's already going out of his house. So as long as it meets the rest of the requirements of sukkahs, that is kosher schach and everything, so it's a kosher sukkah. The back room is not kosher because he lives there the whole year. You probably have a picture of this, don't you?
I don't, thank you. No.
Okay. So we have to use our imagination today.
If he changes that one that he lives there all year long and he takes off the roof.
No, he takes off the roof, so he made a new sukkah. That's not new to the subject. Some could people that have a living room and they lived there the whole year, and then they open up the roof and they put on new schach. So he made a new house. He made a sukkah. Here's the one that's the same thing. He has the straw shack, whatever it is, and he lives there the whole year round. Then now sukkah comes, says everything's kosher. He goes to the Rav, he says everything's kosher. It's 10 tefachim high. It has 3 walls, and the schach is made out of straw, and it's for shade. Everything's good. But the Rav tells him, "You live there the whole year? Yeah, that's my house." He says, "No, then it's not good for sukkahs. You go to your front room over there; it's only a store. Now you can live over there for sukkahs. That's kosher." So that's the Gemara. Inside, 2 shacks of potters, one within the other. The inner one is not a sukkah, and there's 5 in mezuzah because it's his house. The outer one could be made to a sukkah now. It's kosher for a sukkah without doing anything. Just live it, move in. And it's part of a mezuzah because it's a store. It's a side kasha that hilchos mezuzah, a side point. Why is it part of a mezuzah? Even though the outer one is a store and it's not on its own, it wouldn't be chayv in a mezuzah, but it should be chayv because it's a doorway, it's a vestibule to go to the inner room. And that's the halacha that a beishar, an entrance, a vestibule to go into a house, is also chayv in a mezuzah. So even though it's not chayv on its own merit, it should be chayv because it's a beishar to go into the house. The answer is, I'm sorry, but it's chayv in mezuzah. The answer is mishum lo kaviyah. It's not kavua, it's not fixed. Rashi says that even the back room was not fixed. It's not established. It's he lives there. It's a shack, but it's not considered that he
He always stays there.
always stays there. Maybe he doesn't always stay there. I'm not sure what it means. Lo kavia, what I say?
Goes home to his palatial home.
He has a palatial home also. Rashi says, Yishum de lo kavia. He just says, Rashi doesn't explain. He says, lo zu v'lo zu. Neither one is kavua. I'm sorry, make it a little, okay, off to the side. The ein apnimis chashuv aliyos lo beisha. That the inner one is not chashuv enough to deserve a vestibule. And maybe it doesn't mean because he doesn't live there, but it's not such a thing that deserves a hallway. Maybe that's the point. I'm not sure. It doesn't mean that he doesn't always not always there, but it's not a house that deserves that is eligible for a hallway. A chashuv room gets a hallway. This whole thing is not chashuv. So you make an entranceway, a vestibule, a hallway to get into the shack. So that's why the outer one is not Chaim Zuzah. The Gemara continues now. Nothing, a new thing about Sukkah. Tan Rabbana, top line. Kanvach. Gimel Nun Beis Chaf. That's an acronym, a Rashi Tevis, and that stands for Goyim, Nashim, Behema, Kusim. That's it. Goyim, Nashim, Behema, Kusim. Sukkahs Goyim, Sukkahs Nashim, Sukkahs Behema, Sukkahs Goyim, Sukkahs Kusim. Shack that a Goyim made. A shack that a woman made, a shack that's made for behemoths, the animals to be under their shade. A shack that's made for kusim, and not more the kusim also like goyim. So, and any kind of sukkah we call more than any kind of sukkah, even less than this, even though it wasn't made for sukkahs at all. It wasn't made the same sukkah. And you go on the road, and you see a goyish sukkah, a guy sitting in a shack, you ask, can I come in a second? I want to have a drink, or want to eat something, my lunch. And the guy doesn't know from sukkahs b'chlal, he's a guy, and he made a shack for his shade. So you could come inside and use it and eat. And you could check the sukkah. It doesn't have to be made the same sukkah.
This is considered a makom aray.
It's made. It's a place which is made for shade. The guy made it for shade, and you're allowed to use it for the mitzvah of sukkah also. It doesn't have to be made the same. It doesn't have to be made for sukkahs. It does not the same sukkahs mitzvah. It's not like matzah, the same matzah's mitzvah. A sukkah doesn't have to be made the same.
And according to
Yes, wait.
he doesn't have to move the schach.
Right, Topah doesn't say anything. We'll see tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll come in with these things about moving the schach. Here it doesn't say anything. Ilon Gemara so far. Don't do it yet, but here Gemara says that you go on the road, you see a goyish sukkah, you go inside, and you allowed to be to the mitzvah of sukkah, even though it was not made the same sukkah, it wasn't even made as Jewish, a goyish man, or a woman also put from sukkah, or behema. It's a shack made for behemoths.
It's going to say the
The same mitzvah sukkah. What do you mean?
Hashem.
I say the
Shem is sukkah.
It's a sukkah, and he goes into this shack that's made for animals.
Never
Yes.
made for a sukkah. But it is a sukkah.
It doesn't made for shade mitzvah sukkah. It was made for shade. It wasn't made for the mitzvah sukkah. It was made for shade. It's good enough. Sukkah is kusim, also like going.
He's not going to have permission.
Why do you have to make Rosh Hashanah? You have to have a change.
You don't have to.
Pretty good.
Surely this Gemara says you don't have to, and tomorrow we'll talk about it. This Gemara doesn't say anything. Tomorrow's Gemara is going to say Beishamai says Hashem is a sukkah, and I don't know if it's going to say different. Let's see. We'll see tomorrow. So far doesn't say anything. Here it says a goyish sukkah is kosher, women's kosher, and it doesn't mean made for sukkah. It was made for shade. Nothing. That's not the first thing about sukkahs. And these animals also nothing to do with sukkahs. The animals, they just sheep and cows, and they made for them shelter, something to give shade. And now you come there and you sit together with the sheep and you may lay Shabbat sukkah. They say Shalom says that it's not. That's nature. That's not so. Yeah.
Sounds only that people.
It's a Gemara. The Gemara talks about it. That which animals that so is considered smell. So one time they were shechting something and it smelled. So we called them Shalom. He said that's nature. You city boys, you don't know what nature is. That's not a bad smell. As a side point, just like a side point. It depends which animal. Some animals that so is masriach, some not. Okay, as a side point, a footnote. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Make sure that's kosher sukkah. So the Gemara says, of course, it has to be a kosher sukkah. Do you think that just because it's made by goyim and women and animals, so therefore it's not going to be a kosher sukkah? It's kosher even if it's less than that. It doesn't meet the regular requirements. Michael Chassa, make sure that it's made for shade, because these things, if it was made for a different reason, like for privacy, then it's not a kosher sukkah. It has to have been made for shade. But if it's made for shade, even though the guy has his ideas and animals, nothing to women, nothing to do with the mitzvah of sukkah, it's kosher, but it has to have been made for shade. It doesn't have to be made the same mitzvah sukkah. It has to have been made. It doesn't have to have been made for Jews. It It doesn't have to have been made for people, but it has to have been made for shade.
So that's a is required.
Yeah, that is a requirement. It has to be made for shade. It might, I might say, just maybe wrong. If someone made it the shame for sukkah, they didn't know that it has to be made for shade. Maybe it's not kosher. He thinks it's a sukkah. It doesn't have to be shade. Sukkah means it has to be shade. Yeah, it says shade is good enough, even though it's not the same as a sukkah.
But even it has to keep with all the rules of not touching things that are mekabel tuma and things like this. And we're going to find this all by goy. Are you able to you inspect it all yourself before you sit in the goy's sukkah?
So it has to have all the halachas of sukkah that are kosher. You're mentioning a chumrah that we'll get to it eventually, that it could be supported by things which is mekabel tuma. But for the pashup shot, this schach has to be made out of something which is not vulnerable to tumah, not what it's leaning on. We'll get to that eventually. But you're right. That whatever the halachas of sukkah are, this goy's sukkah is not going to be any more lenient. But the chiddush is that even though it's a goy's sukkah, it's not any worse. But not that it's any better. So you're right.
Right.
You look at the sukkah, you see that it's kosher schach, kosher walls, everything's kosher. The only problem is that a goy made it for his own use. That's good. That's not a problem. It's a kosher sukkah, even though it's made by a goy, for a goy, as long as it's made for shade. So goyim, women, behemoths, kusim. Then the brayso ends off. Sukkah mikom makom. Any kind of sukkah is good. So lasui mai. What's it coming to add on? A bigger chiddush. Lasui sukkah is rakbash. Another kind of four sukkahs, and that has also an acronym that stands Reish Kuf Beis Shin. What does that stand for? Tanu Rabbanan Sukkahs Rakbash, which means Sukkahs Roim, Sukkahs Kayatzim, Sukkahs Borgen, and Sukkahs Shomer Peres. That's the Rakbash. Shepherds. Kayatzim means people that are guarding the figs when they dry out. They would dry the figs in the field to get dry figs, and they'd have a shomer to watch it, the animals, people, whatever. And Borgenin, which Rashi says means that the shomer ha'ir, people who watch the city, the guards of the city, so they also have a little shack to sit in. Like we have the guards, we have a little hut for the shomer, and shomer repairs, people that are watching produce in the fields, that animals shouldn't come, all these things. So they're Jewish, but they're just using it as a hut, a temporary hut. As the Gemara is going to say soon, that when they finish whatever they're doing in their place, they finish pasturing over here, they take it down, move someplace else. All these things, they're not fixed in the same place. They just stay there temporarily. So what does it say? These are also kosher. Sukkah mikom makom, any kind of sukkah. Not even these, even less than sukkah is also kosher. Same as the first brayso, it has to make sure that it's kosher. And the Gemara says, Michael Chas, of course, it has to be kosher. That was made for shade. Same as before, make sure that not just for privacy, it has to have been made for shade. The brayso ended off here, any kind of sukkah, mikom makom lasui mai. So this brayso goes back to the first brayso, sukkah's ganva. So interesting. Each brayso said that these kind of sukkahs are good. Let's say the first one said goyish sukkahs are good, and then even a shepherd sukkah is good. And then the other one said a shepherd sukkah is good, even a goyish sukkah is good. Each one held that this one is more pashut than the other one is a chiddush. And that's what the Gemara wants to say at the end, that each one has a plus and a minus. The one that says that the ganvach is goyim, nashim, behema, kusim. That's stronger. That's a better sukkah. That's more pashut that is kosher because it's kavua, that it's fixed in this place. The guy who makes the sukkah, the women, the animals, it's set, it's fixed over there. It's true. It's not made for people that are chayiv in sukkah, but it is established sukkah, and that's why he said that's short kosher. And he says even the rakvash, which is not kavua, that moves around. The Tana B'Ei Mikol Makom, he says there was any kind of sukkah, la'asuyei rakvash, to include that even rakvash is also kosher. Roim, chayotzim, borgenin, shomer peirus, the low kvi. Even though, as Rashi says, when the pasture finishes over here, they take down the shack and go someplace else. And when the peirus are finished drying, they take it down also. And when the city also, they don't have to always have a shomer over there, whatever the case is, they're not considered kavua. Even that's also kosher. The high Tana, the second Tana, he said rakvash is more simple. Everyone agrees, everybody, but the only question was which one is more simple. High Tana, the rakvash, and like rakvash, he says that the rakvash, the pasture, the shepherd's hut is more simple, that is kosher. The bnei chiyubanin, at least they're Jewish. He said the chiddush is even goyim and nashim and behema. That's not chayiv in sukkah. That's even a bigger chiddush. But everybody agrees to each other that it doesn't have to be a Jewish sukkah. It doesn't have to be made for people. It doesn't have to be made for kavua. It doesn't have to be made to be in the same place. They're all kosher. One thing you have to make sure that it was made for shade. That's the end of the Gemara. So easy Gemara today. The whole first sugya was that the shape of the kosher sukkah has to be able to fit in to the sukkah that you're making. You're making a big sukkah, a different shape, but it has to be able to fit in the square of 7 by 7 tefachim. Make whatever shape you want, as long as you can fit inside there a square of 7 by 7. No chidushim, everything's simple. The next Gemara spoke about that new halacha, that if you live there the whole year, it's not kosher. Even everything's kosher about it, but in case of somebody lives in this shack the whole year round, so there's no difference going into sukkahs. So then you'd have to go. That's not a good sukkah. But something which is a store that is not used for his living quarters, then he could live into it, move into it for the sukkah, then it'll be kosher. Of course, all these things, if you pick up the shack and put it down again, you made a whole new house. But if you just want to remain in the same hut that you lived the whole year, that's not kosher. If someone theoretically, well, let's say, would leave his sukkah standing and use it the whole year round also, and then comes sukkahs, he continues, that's not good. He has to have, it shouldn't be mentioned.
I have a friend that does it the whole year, but during the year he doesn't
He doesn't use it at all.
No, he uses it if he has a shelf
Yeah.
off seats, he doesn't do whatever. But
I'm not sure. Yeah, I hear it.
no, that'll be like the what do you call it?
The
first
store.
room
At the store.
He
He doesn't use it for living over there. Very nice. So that'd be kosher also. A person has a sukkah the whole year round, but then he uses it only for occasions, entertainment, whatever it might be. But he doesn't use it to live over there. That will be kosher. Only if he lives over there, then it's not kosher. We see that a store is also not chayv in a mezuzah. A beishar is chayv in a mezuzah, but only a beishar to a chashuv room, not a beishar to a hut. The next Gemara just said that even if it's made by guy, for guy and by guy and women, all these things are kosher, even animals, as long as it's made for shade. And also, if it's something which is not established and moves around, they don't leave it over there. Like rohim, kayasim, all these kind of shepherds, also is kosher, as long as it's made for shade. Okay. Anything else? Anybody want to say anything before we start? Yes, everybody. We'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be back with Hilchos Tisha B'Av. In about 12 minutes. Gan Bach, everything's kosher.
Rakbash is Jews.
Right. But at the end of the story, even if you have both, you have a Goyish shepherd is also going to be kosher. Okay, we'll be back soon. Yes, everybody.
Toda raba.
Thank you. Thank you.